Hi, my name is Vishal Prasad and I welcome you to the Scrum Framework video course. This course has not just been designed for beginners but also for experienced Scrum practitioners who wish to reappraise their knowledge of the Scrum Framework. During this course, we will not just refer the Scrum Framework, rather deep dive into the practical implementations of Scrum. In the upcoming modules, you will learn about the elements of Scrum, the roles, the artifacts, the events, and the rules that bind all of them together. We will address common challenges faced by Scrum practitioners and look at how we can address them based on a certain context. We'll also take a look at anti-patterns, which are very common across Scrum teams, and also see organizations which have delivered Scrum products in a successful manner. I do believe that mastering Scrum is not as simple as the framework itself, but I also believe that Scrum is one of those frameworks which can help teams build complex products in a much better way. By the end of this course, you would have gained a deeper insight of the Scrum framework and also be aware of the dysfunctions that lay around the Scrum framework with many of the teams. So I welcome you to deep dive into the fantastic world of Scrum. Let's briefly take a look at the Scrum framework. Scrum is a process framework used to build complex products. It comprises of Scrum teams, their associated roles, events, artifacts, and the rules that bind all of these together. The entire Scrum framework is based on the empirical process model, or empiricism. And the three pillars of empiricism are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The transparency in Scrum is provided by the artifacts, and events provide formal grounds for inspection and adaptation. And these three pillars are guarded by Scrum values. Values of commitment, courage, focus, respect, and openness. Every team member is expected to imbibe these values and together build complex products which are successful and done along with collaboration with their key stakeholders. Scrum is an iterative and incremental framework. And at the heart of Scrum, it's the sprint. Now, sprint is a time-boxed event of a month or less, and it's called a container event. Within this container, the development team converts requirements into done increments and also perform other events. The definition of what a done increment means is defined by the definition of done. Now, this is a shared understanding between the team members to understand what kind of quality a product is expected to have. A development team is usually 3 to 9 people. That's a recommended size. But you might have a network of development teams working together on a product, which means an increment will be a collective sum of all the integrated increments created during a sprint by all of these network teams. Every increment is completed as per the definition of done, such that they can be released immediately if needed. This process of creating done increments repeats every sprint, and a new sprint starts as soon as the old one is completed. The details of the requirements for building an increment is maintained in a product backlog. This is an ordered list of everything that is needed in a product and is managed effectively by a person called the product owner. Now, product owner is a single person, it's not a committee, and they are responsible for effective backlog management, which they do through an activity called product backlog refinement. The product backlog refinement can happen in isolation or along with the entire team. It is the act of adding details, estimates, and an order to the product backlog. Although the product owner may have the development team perform these activities, the accountability of the product backlog and the product lies with the product owner always. The development team works on product backlog items every sprint, and a sprint starts with a sprint planning meeting. This is an 8-hour time-boxed event for a month-long sprint. And over here, the product owner and the development team decide what ready items can be built. And this is based on the capacity and the past performance of the team. And at the same time, the development team decides how these selected elements or items will be converted into a done increment. During this event, the product owner and the development team inspect the product backlog and craft a sprint goal. They also derive how the sprint goal will be achieved, and that is added in the sprint backlog, which is a transparent artifact, and it provides the progress of the development team throughout the sprint. Once the 8-hour time box expires, the team is off to work their magic in order to create the increments. It is required that the sprint goal is not endangered throughout the sprint. And for this purpose, the development team meets once every 24 hours to track their progress towards the sprint goal. This is done in the daily Scrum meeting. This is a key inspect and adapt meeting that happens for 15 minutes every day at the same place. During this event, the development team inspects the sprint backlog, tracks the progress towards the goal, and if needed, adapts the sprint backlog and their plan to deliver the increment. At the end of the sprint, the Scrum team performs a sprint review. Now, sprint review is a 4-hour time-boxed meeting for a month-long sprint. This meeting is attended by the Scrum team and any relevant stakeholders who are invited by the product owner. During this event, the product owner discusses the product backlog items which were done and which were not done. At the same time, the development team showcases what was completed, and then the stakeholders and the Scrum team together inspect the current product backlog, the marketplace, the capabilities, the skills, the current increment, and finally adapt the product backlog. A sprint ends with the sprint retrospective meeting. This is a 3-hour time-boxed event for a month-long sprint. And during this meeting, the team inspects how the last sprint went. The inspection is done across people, processes, tools, and any improvements that are identified are added to the planning of the next sprint. This diagram represents the Scrum Framework, and this is promoted and supported by one of the most important roles in Scrum called the Scrum Master. Now consider the Scrum Master as a modern manager. They are responsible for managing the project in a Scrum way, and they are servant leaders. They serve the product owner by helping them with effective backlog management. They serve the development team by removing impediments that are in way of their development process. At the same time, they serve the organization to understand Scrum as a process and adoption of that Scrum process within the organization. Together, these immutable rules, events, artifacts, and all the rules form what we call the Scrum Framework. To summarize, Scrum is a lightweight process framework. It's simple enough to understand, difficult to master. The simplicity is evident that the Scrum Framework can actually be explained in less than 10 minutes. The implementation, however, comes with its own challenges. In the upcoming modules, we'll deep dive into the elements of Scrum and see how these implementations can be tackled, starting with the purpose of Scrum.